start with the plan of salvation because we are waiting for the soon return of Jesus. And the most important thing in these last days is one, that we personally know Jesus for ourselves and that we are sharing him. You know, what are you supposed to do as you watch and wait for Jesus? You're supposed to be abiding. You're supposed to be busy doing the work of God. And what is the work of God? Sharing the gospel, sharing the good news that God came, put on humanity, and paid the price for us, that God made Jesus. Jesus is God, and he came and he was made to be sin for us so that we might become the righteousness of God through Christ Jesus. And so we have this exchange that takes place when we receive him as our Savior. Jesus takes our sin upon himself, and we receive his righteousness. His righteousness is bestowed upon us. The only way that we can go to the Father is through the Son. The only way that we can be righteous is if Jesus's righteousness is given to us as a gift and we accept it. That is salvation. We don't do anything to offset his perfect gift. We don't do anything to offset the finished work of Jesus on the cross. We simply receive him. And then when we do receive him, when we put our trust in him and we become a child of God, then we want to live differently because he changes us. He lines us up with himself. And so works follow faith, but works do not save a person or keep a person saved. And so tonight, we're going to look at 2023 to 2024. We're going to look at a biblical review and predictions going into the next year. And so these are biblical predictions. We don't need to be a prophet. I recommend not listening to prophets because I don't know of a prophet that's not a false prophet. And so it's very important that we are getting our predictions from God's word. And that's what we're going to do tonight. And so 2024, I think this is such a cute little meme here. You know, here's 2024. Let's see what happens there. You know, when it's holding the little stick to open up the door. And this is the same, actually, this is the same picture we used last year, because it's like, we know what's coming in the year ahead is going to be more closer together birth pains. Spoiler alert, that's what we're going to get until we see Jesus, until we return with Jesus. Actually, the birth pains are going to continue. Things are going to get worse. Things don't get better in the end times. Things get worse. And that's okay. That's okay. That's not, we're actually, as much as we're going to be looking at some really heavy stuff tonight, I hope that this is very encouraging, because we are to encourage one another as we see these things, because we are literally seeing the Bible play out right before our eyes. And that should be an encouraging thing. It's bittersweet because we do see the heaviness of our world and what the lost are going through. So we're going to look at some top prophetic events that happened in 2023. And we're also going to look at what we can expect for 2024. And so Bible prophecy begins and ends with the nation of Israel. And so we'll see, although a lot of the birth pains that we're seeing are global, and that's part of the end times as well, that this is global, what's happening. But the key and the main neon sign of the end of the age was the rebirth of Jesus, of Israel in 1948. And so Israel is the main key. That's how we know that we're the final generation, is Israel. And watching Israel, we see just how close we are to the rapture and the last week for Israel, Daniel's 70th week. And so we're seeing events unfold today that are massive in seeing where we're going in the days, weeks, and months ahead. And so 2024 has started out with a bang. 2024 has not in any way been a slow start prophetically. And we saw that in the ending of 2023, we saw that everything was revving up. And it's not that there's this magical January 1st. January 1st is not God's new year. God's new year is Nisan. That'll be April, I think, 9th this year. So God's new year is in the spring. That's when he said this would be the new year for you. The world's new year, the global new year, the beast new year, I would say, would be January. And so that's something to keep in mind too. But we saw how everything is revving up and the world is getting ready for the tribulation. And so we'll look at that. But biblical prophecy begins and ends with Israel. Israel is the key. Israel is the main one to keep focused on. So, spoiler alert, right from the beginning, what lies ahead is stronger and closer together birth pains. We are in transition labor, okay? These birth pains are on top of one another. There's a reason why in recent years the phrase polycrisis was invented by the UN, because these crises that we're seeing are on top of one another, and they're so close together that we can't keep up with them, that people can't mourn, that people can't process one crisis before the next crisis comes. And that's why a lot of people are just going back to sleep now, because we get so used to being in this, and you can't live that way. You can't live in a constant state of crisis, in a constant state of trauma. You weren't created to live that way. And so we can't process it. So a lot of people just go back to sleep. A lot of people just put their head in the sand. But as watchers, you want to watch these things, but we understand that we are watching for the things that Jesus said would happen. But at the same time, we are watching for Jesus. We're not watching for the Antichrist, and we're not watching for the tribulation. We're watching for Jesus, but we're seeing these things that let us know that he is coming soon. So what are the birth pains? Wars and rumors of wars. Last year was pivotal in wars really taking up to the next step and becoming a main identifier for 2023 was war. And we're going to see that even further. This year, I fully expect World War III, if we're not already in World War III. A lot of people would say we are actually already in World War III, but I fully expect this year all-out regional war in the Middle East. That may have happened today by what's unfolding right now in the Middle East, in Israel, and in Lebanon, but all-out regional war and World War III. Israel is moving toward Daniel's 70th week. And so they're expecting to sacrifice the 10th red heifer by Passover this year. So in the next coming few months, they will be sacrificing the 10th red heifer, which is supposed to be for the Messiah, which we know is going to be the Antichrist. And so they are gearing toward that sacrifice that is paving the way for the third temple. And then we're going to see increase in global one world government control through problem, reaction, solution. We see them doing this all over again. They create a problem, or they take a problem and they make sure it doesn't go to waste. They manage the reaction. They tell you through media how you're supposed to feel about it. And then magically they have a solution already, and they show you how they're going to save you. And so we're going to see that in the world economics. We're going to see, most likely, we're going to see a collapse globally of the economies, climate chaos, and health chaos. And so all of that is gearing up. It's going to get more and more severe. this year, and we may even see, hopefully we won't see, hopefully we'll be gone before these things hit their peak. So the UN, well, we will be gone before they hit their peak, but hopefully we'll be gone before the crash happens. So the UN is literally counting down to completely controlling every aspect of life to avoid Armageddon. They actually said that if by 2030, if in the next 7 years, they are not able to reach these 17 SDG goals, and there's going to be an 18th one, which is most likely either space or Israel. Those are the two ones that are kind of competing for the 18th SDG right now. But those goals, if they're not met, will result in Armageddon, is what they say, which is kind of what was going to happen when Jesus comes back. It's Armageddon. So the masses are lining up to follow the lie. And so we saw that. And we're going to look more at that, how you can see how the masses of people have already been indoctrinated and have already been prepared to buy hook, line, and sinker a lie and fight for a lie. So how can we know this? How can we know that this is what we're looking forward, that this is what is going to happen in about the next year? You don't need to be a prophet to know what's going to happen in the last days. God gave us his prophecy in the Bible. All we need to do is to read it. We need to read the Bible, and we need to watch what's happening through a biblical lens. And so we need to know the Bible well enough to be able to see the trends that are happening in the world and understand where it's going, and understand when we hear something that's not biblical, to be able to say that's not what God said is going to happen. And when we do that, when we look at the news, when we look at everything through a biblical worldview, we can know what's around the corner to an extent. And so, we've seen a lot of these things, they've been teetering. They've been teetering for a while. And the reason why they keep teetering and they don't just fall off is because the restrainer is still here. And so the enemy is perplexed about this too, because he's ready to go on to the 7-year tribulation, but we're still here. And so everything is still teetering. But we see now things are teetering, but things are starting to fall over the edge little bit by little bit. These things that we've been watching for, expecting for, like this regional war in the Middle East, is actually beginning to unfold. And so the things are going to hold off a bit because everything can't completely go into the tribulation while we're still here. So as long as the restrainer's here, there is a restraining on the evil. And that's one reason we still see things teetering for such a long period of time. So what did we see in 2023? We saw wars and threats of wars, that rumor of wars, those threats of war. And we see them so much that we kind of just assume, well, China's been talking about invading Taiwan forever and they haven't invaded. And so you just get used to thinking, well, it's not going to happen. It is going to happen. And just like Russia, for the longest time, was talking about going into Ukraine, and then they went into Ukraine. And so we see these things building. And last year we saw war going further than it had. And this year we're going to see that increasing. And so here we see in the Middle East, we see a regional war building. And so there are multiple fronts coming against Israel. We see the beginnings of Psalm 83. We see the beginnings of Ezekiel 38 and 39. And so we see a lot too with the Houthis here. This is going to affect trade. It's going to affect money and economies as well. So again, the biggest prophecy that we're going to see, the biggest timepiece here, is Israel. Israel is the one to watch. Israel is the timepiece. The whole world is going to center around Israel. And we see that right now. You see atrocities happening all around the world. No one cares about them. Everyone cares about Israel and Palestine and Gaza, because that's where the enemy's attention is, and that's where God's attention is. These are God's chosen people. And so that's why this teeny tiny little slither is the center of the world, because it's about spiritual warfare. It's about God. And so the tribulation is Daniel's 70th week for Israel. And that's the final 7. We talked about the final 7 recently. And that is what is just around the corner. That's the brink here. So Israel here, God's time clock, God promised that he would bring the children of Israel back to the land of Israel. Isaiah 11 through 12. Then it will happen on that day that the Lord will again recover the second time with his hand the remnant of his people who will remain from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he will lift up a standard for the nations and assemble the banished ones of Israel. And he will gather the dispersed of Judah from the 4 corners of the earth. So this here, when Judah came back after the Babylonian exile, it wasn't the banished ones of Israel, it was just Judah. And so this second coming back is all of Israel, all 12 tribes of Israel, not just Judah, but all of Israel is returning. So 2023 has been a peak year for Jews making Aliyah to Israel. And so this is interesting because it was a peak year even before October 7th. And October 7th, instead of people wanting to get away from Israel because of the war, they're completely surrounded. They've got 7 fronts. War on 7 fronts right now. But instead of that being a deterrent, people are coming in. It's actually caused more to come in, one, because of the anti-Semitism, but also because it's called people back to their homeland. They want to go back and defend their homeland. They see that something is going on. So since many Jews are realizing it's the only safe place, it's the only homeland, because you see this anti-Semitism. And so when God said that he would do that he would use even the enemies to accomplish his perfect will. So here, Aliyah, this literally means ascent or rise. And I think this is interesting here too, because there's this ascent. This is them rising up, going home. So this is the immigration to Israel. Israel's always been the center of the Jewish universe, but for centuries, the dreaming of moving to Israel was just a dream. God planted this desire in his people. God has planted this connection to the land of Israel, the children of Israel and the land of Israel. This has been planted in them. And so this is coming to the surface, and they want to go home. This promise that he would return them, and when he did return them, the Messiah will come. And so Israel is not only returning home, but they're also returning to God. They're seeking their Messiah. They're literally calling out for their Messiah to come. And he hears these cries, and he will honor them. So here we see continued, I will gather you from the nations, and I'll bring you back from the countries that you've been scattered. And I'll give you back the land of Israel again. And they shall come, and they shall take away the detestable things thereof, and all the abominations thereof. So they come in unbelieving. But all the abominations and all the idols are going to be gone, because they're going to find God through this. They're going to realize that Jesus is their Messiah. And I'll give them one heart, and I'll put a new spirit within them. And I'll take the stony heart out of the flesh, and I will give them a heart of flesh, and I'll make them walk in my statutes and keep my ordinances and my commands. And so we see here, this has been partially fulfilled in Acts, but not completely fulfilled, because the nation as a whole rejected Messiah. But God promised that there would be a day during that final week of Daniel's 70 weeks that Israel would return to him, and that he would as a nation, put a new heart within them and a new spirit within them. And so we see here that this year is the 30-year peak in Jews returning home. And we see here that this is the safest place to be Jewish. 2,600 people have moved to Israel just since Hamas invaded. So just since October 7th, 2,600 decided to go home. And so we see here, this isn't, in 2023, this wasn't just coming home to Israel, but it was also coming home to Messiah. And so here we see these young Israeli soldiers, they are singing in anticipation of the coming Messiah. This is a beautiful video where they're together and they are singing and calling out to God to send Messiah. No, we are living in these days. You are literally living in the Bible. Don't ever become a sleepy Christian. You are literally living in the Bible. How awesome. You have the opportunity to be like Simeon and Anna that were looking for Messiah and excited to see his day. And so here we see, this past year, we saw more attention again on the Abraham Accords, which this right here is blasphemy, horrible. God gave that promise not to all of Abraham's sons, it's to the son of promise. And so Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is where the promise lies. And so what we saw here, the increase here of this death covenant, that could very well be an amendment or use the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords are kind of part of a lot of this that's already happening. And we see here a famous rabbi saying, after Bibi, after Netanyahu, comes the Messiah. And so here, this prophecy that Benjamin Netanyahu will be the last prime minister before the Messiah comes. And here we see the rebuilding of the third temple and all the attention here going to rebuild the third temple. We see that with the heifers as well. And Saudis are seeking to reboot Temple Mount status with the peace deal. And no, a lot of this right here is the very reason that October 7th happened, because it was Alaska flood. Remember, Jesus said, we talked about this before too, Jesus said the end will come like a flood. And what happened on October 7th? Alaska flood. It was all about keeping Israel from rebuilding her temple and sacrificing again. So what do we expect in 2024? Sacrifice. They're going to sacrifice the red heifer. And so they're expecting to do it by Passover 2024. And here we see in the last days, Israel's going to be in her land. Check. She's in her land and she's continuing to come home. God is continuing to bring the 12 tribes of Israel back to her land. That's going to continue to happen all throughout the tribulation as well. Face wars. Psalm 83, I think that's what we're seeing right now. Psalm 83. It's still building. Ezekiel 38 and 39. We're seeing both of these. Ezekiel 38, I believe, is going to be during the first half of the tribulation. But we see the players already at work. The major players, Russia, Iran, Turkey, we already see them at work right now. And Israel's going to be deceived by a false Messiah. They're going to be deceived by the Antichrist. And Israel is calling out for their Messiah now, and they're going to, unfortunately, believe a lie. They're going to, unfortunately, do that. And we're going to see Israel rebuild her temple. No, we won't. Maybe we will from heaven's point of view. But Israel will be rebuilding her temple. And so we see the red heifer is this huge step forward in doing that. And so we see all these things are on the helm. All these things are beginning to take place. And so today was huge prophetically. Right now, Israel is on high alert because Israel attacked in Lebanon, in Beirut, Lebanon. They took out, I believe the number right now is 7 key leaders of Hamas that were in Lebanon. And they were about to meet with Hezbollah's main leader. And so Israel did a strategic attack and was able to kill at least 7 of these. And one of them is the just the second in command, I believe. And so it is incredible what happened just today. And so Hezbollah is foaming at the mouth. Iran is foaming at the mouth. These were people, of course, that are underneath Iran. Iran is the main bad guy that is fueling all of these terrorists. Hamas is fueled, Hezbollah is fueled by Iran. Iran is a main supporter and main provider of these bad guys. And so Iran is foaming at the mouth. Hamas is foaming at the mouth. Hezbollah is, all of these are swearing that they're going to have revenge. And so Israel is expecting, and right now it's already going down, is expecting a huge response to this, to where they knew in the next days, weeks, months, they would be in an all-out regional war. But it looks like what was going to take days, weeks, months may very well be on us within the end of the week. And so the last few days have been very, very prophetically significant in seeing how Israel is going into that place where she's desperate, and Israel's definitely in travail. So next, prophetically, we see the category of events in 2023 was a continued rise of the beast system and the harlot that rides it. And so you see all these things are happening, or they're all converging. We hear a lot about converging now, and they're all converging at the same time. So it's not just Israel being at war and Israel going through these things that are putting her in place for the 70th week, but it's also the tribulation beast system, the Antichrist system, that's going to give power to the Antichrist. We see it rising and getting in position. We see the mark of the beast technology getting into position. We see the false religion. We see the harlot Babylon getting into position. So we're seeing this convergence of all the players ready and in place. So in Revelation, we see the 4 horses riding, and the white horse comes in to conquer. First, it's conquering, but not by weapons. The conquering is by diplomacy, which is exactly what the world government is trying to do right now. They're trying to have this 7-year deal where everybody comes together and comes underneath one big global system, giving up individual sovereignty for one big system in order to save the world from Armageddon. I mean, it's exactly what the bad guys are saying. And so the beast system is gaining control over the world by fear and by diplomacy. And they're going to turn their control over to one man. They're going to turn it over to the Antichrist. But the initial conquering is done by diplomacy. Now, after they do that, then comes the other horsemen. And so, but the beast system gained ground in 2023 by fear of war. 2023 was a big war year, fear of war. We got to do something to stop the wars. Fear of sicknesses, fear of climate chaos, fear of economic crisis, all these fears. And so we have the world leaders and the world unelected leaders, the world's elite coming together to figure out a way to save everybody by taking control of every aspect of your life. So what do we expect in 2024? The stage is being set to take advantage of all these areas in 2024. We're being warned of a regional war in the Middle East. That's popping off right now. We're being warned of World War III. Sicknesses, climate chaos, worldwide economic depression. All these things we're being told is coming, not in the coming years, coming by spring. We're being told that all these things are going to be here in the next 3 or 4 months. So this is where we can especially get nervous, because these things can affect us personally. It's one thing when we're looking at a war that's in Israel, or we're looking at a war that's on the other side of the world. But when we're talking about the economy, when we're talking about our own personal rights, we're talking about our own personal health, that's where we can get nervous, because this is when it actually starts to affect us personally. But I want to encourage you, instead of allowing fear to set in, to be encouraged, because this is not our home. God said he is going to let everything be shaken that can be shaken, so that people will hold on to what can't be shaken. And so he's allowing us to feel this shaking because he wants us to let go of this world. There's nothing in this world that you want to hold on to. Let go of it. It's temporary. And once you hear the sound of the trumpets, none of that's going to matter. The only thing that's going to matter once you hear the sound of the trumpet are people. That's all that's going to matter. And so this is not our home. And as we see the day approaching, we should be encouraged and focus more on our coming king than our nation, than America, or whatever country you're from, or this global system, because we know the end of the nations. God tells us the end of the nations. And the nations aren't saved by the church. That's not biblical. That's a heresy that's going around right now. That's not in the Bible at all. Nothing saves the nations. Jesus comes back and he sets up his kingdom, his perfect thing. The church doesn't set it up for him and then he comes back. That's not biblical. And so what did our king tell us to do? What did he tell us to do? What's our response when we see these things begin to happen? Luke 21:28. And when you see these things begin to come to pass, these things that we've been talking about, all of these birth pains, when you see them begin to come to pass, then run around screaming and shouting, say no and start picketing. No. He said, look up and lift up your head, for your redemption draws nigh. We're supposed to look up. We're supposed to be paying attention to what God is doing. We're supposed to be in the Bible, and we're supposed to be warning other people and helping other people come to Jesus. That's what we're supposed to do as we see this day approaching and as we see these things come. And so here we see, as all of this transpires, Israel is nearing a full-scale war with Hezbollah. Today, that took on a whole new level. It's happening. The Red Heifers are still apparently qualified and possibly ready for sacrifice within months. They're ready now for sacrifice, is what some are saying. They could even possibly be already sacrificed. They could have already even done that. So that's here. A second great American solar eclipse, the solar eclipse that puts an X through the center of the nation, is happening on April 8th, which is the beginning of Nisan, which is actually New Year's, biblically. That is the great American solar eclipse that puts an X to the nation. And an unprecedented presidential election is set to go down with a resurgent Trump and incumbent Biden. So we're looking for the last trumpet. It's going to blow, and then the little horn will arise. The Antichrist will arise. So we're not waiting for the Antichrist. We're waiting for the trumpet. And so it's amazing, amazing time to be alive. And so we see the world beast system and what it's done and how it's coming to the surface. And we also see the harlot one world religion. So in 2023, this is continuing to grow. There is a continued false light that is growing through I want to say the church with like quotation marks, because there's all these big church movements, but they're hand in hand with the Pope. They're ecumenical. They're hand in hand with Mormonism. They're hand in hand with coexistence. And let's set aside our differences for everybody to come together. That's the harlot. That's not God. That's not of God. Those movements are not of God. When you have, for instance, people get real mad when you talk about the chosen. But for instance, you have people visualizing Jesus, and they see Jonathan Rummy, who talks to the dead, who is an Catholic, who is a Catholic, who is as lost as he could be, And so people are following people that do not know Jesus at all. And you see this setup that after we're gone, they're going to go to the Pope. They're going to go to Jonathan Rumi, however you say his name. They're going to go to the actors of the chosen. They're going to go to these religious leaders that are taking front and center because they are still going to be here. And they're going to be unrepentant. Many of them are going to be unrepentant because right now they're so blinded and probably satanically oppressed and possessed. People are going to go to them. They're going to wonder what happened. And they're going to believe the lie because they want to, because they have itching ears to believe the lie. And so what did we see in 2023? We saw this movement. We saw this coming together of false light, of ecumenical. Let's all come together. Coexistence. World religions uniting to save the planet. We saw unprecedented natural disasters. All of that coming underneath this climate religion. And so here you see the Faith Pavilion at COP28, Faith Climate Action. So these are things that look good and they sound good, but they are absent Jesus. So therefore they're not good. They're just a false light. They're just a false good. And it causes a lot of people to follow a false Jesus altogether. There's no salvation in a Jesus that isn't the Jesus of the Bible. And you have to be in the Bible in order to know the Jesus of the Bible. You have to read the Bible to know him instead of being lied to, like so many are being lied to right now. And so Pope Francis here, he's part of the beast system. He's part of it. He's front runner for the false prophet, in my opinion. Pope Francis here calls for a two-state solution. He's right there with the beast system. He's right there with the UN every step of the way. And so what do we expect to see? Seeing what we've seen, what do we expect to see? We expect to see it continue. We expect to see the harlot becoming more and more bold. You can see it. The world is tolerant of everything, and everyone, except for Jews and biblical Christians. Now, notice the world is tolerant of fake Christians. The world is very tolerant of the chosen, for instance. The world is very tolerant of the things that have the mass appeal, but no actual biblical truth. And so the world is tolerant of those things. The world is tolerant of a false light. The world is not tolerant of Judaism or biblical Christianity, because those are God's people. And so you're going to continue to see more tolerance of everything else and intolerance of the things of God. And so you're going to continue to see a progress in uniting religions under climate and social goals and causes. And so more and more, what's good is going to be coming together underneath social justice or coming together underneath climate justice. And so it's all going to be underneath these causes that have nothing to do with salvation, that have nothing to do with Jesus alone being the way to God, but have everything to do with what we can all coexist under and agree under, because that's the harlot. And you're going to see more unprecedented natural disasters because those are the birth pains. And Jesus said you're going to see them get closer together and more severe as you get closer and closer to the return of Jesus. And so here, right on January 1st, was a huge earthquake in Japan, 7.6. And unfortunately, many people died. And they've had, I believe, 100 and maybe 160 aftershocks. The whole place has been shaking. And so, and we've seen in the later part of 2023 too, uptick in volcanoes, uptick in earthquakes and floods. And so all of those things are becoming more and more pronounced. And so after the white horse, after conquest through diplomacy, conquest through causes, right? Then there is the next horses. And I don't think the horses have any time in between them. I think these horses go out in quick succession of one another. And so there's war. And we already see the red horse. We already see war. But peace is going to be completely removed from the earth after we're gone. And that makes sense because the restrainer's gone. All these wars that are just chopping at the bit, all these things that it's like they're teetering. After we're gone, those wars are going to erupt and there's going to be full-on World War III, where everybody's going to try to take advantage of the crisis. And so there's war, the red horse, followed by famine and inflation, the black horse. Again, we already see this. We already see famine. We already see the setup for famine with the killing off of animals globally, with the crops that are dying off globally, all these things, it's already being set up. But then when you have war on top of it, this is going to, it's going to just domino. And that is going to end up with the inflation, with the economies of the world collapsing underneath all these things and collapsing to set up for the digital currency. Because remember, by the mid-trib, it has to be in place for the mark of the beast. Now, the mark of the beast isn't implemented until after the mid-trib, but it has to already be in place, and it is already in place. The technology is already there. It's a matter of getting the world on these digital currencies that can be controlled to where you can turn somebody off. Won't be able to buy or sell. They have to be a citizen of the planet. They have to be on good standing. They have to have that social credit score. And so all of that is in the works. All of that's already in the works. And so here, that's the pale horse. And so notice this doesn't mean that the white horse comes and then war erupts. All of these things can be happening at the same time in quick succession to one another. And so this is what we're seeing happen right now. And I think that's the way it's actually going to unfold after we're gone. So here we're already hearing that 2024 is going to be the year of World War III. And so I think that's makes a lot of sense unless us, the restrainer, restrains an all-out World War III. I believe it very well will be that this year we're going to see full-on World War III. I mean, and so also this is really interesting, and we've been talking about this for a while. This is the Focus 2030, the countdown clock. This is really, really interesting, okay? Because, if you've been following this countdown clock, January 1st it was supposed to be exactly 7 years. This was counting down to where it would be exactly 7 years on January 1st. This is the screenshot from yesterday. Today, it's not 2 days, it's 3 days. They've been moving the clock. Why? They've been moving the clock. It was supposed to be already 6 years and so many months, and because that was already supposed to be come January 1st. That would be the exactly 7-year mark. But something's not going the way that they expected. And so they tampered with the clock. And so here, this was yesterday's clock, but today it's 3 days if you go check. So, I understand too, the enemy does not know when we leave. He does not know when we leave. He knows it's about time. He knows it's about time for the tribulation to begin, but he doesn't know exactly. He can't do what he wants to do as long as the restrainer is here. He is waiting on us to leave. We're waiting on Jesus. Well, the enemy is waiting too. He doesn't know. And so it's interesting when you see something like this. It made me scratch my head when I looked at it, and I'm like, it's 3 days today when it should be be counting down, not, but they've had to alter it. It was interesting. And I do not know why. So what did we see in 2023? We saw wars and rumors of wars. 2023 was characterized by war. Major banks going under globally, and global worries of a coming severe correction. There's going to be a severe correction. It's set up that way. It's set up to where it cannot maintain where it's at. It's on purpose. The advancement of BRICS and Russia and China and Iran moving away from the dollar. And so I believe yesterday or today, just at the start of the new year, there were another, I think, 5 countries that joined BRICS, and they're moving away from the dollar. So that's the economies of the world are being shaken. Rise of pestilences, rise of diseases. October 7th, huge sign here, leading to a war that is now at 7 fronts between Israel and her Arab neighbors, possibly Psalm 83 war forming right before our eyes. And then we've noticed this mob mentality that makes no other sense except for spiritual warfare, that is easily influenced and indoctrinated against God and toward a lie. The lie is Satan. But there's just these lies. And wise fools, people thinking that they're smart, but they're just regurgitating lies that they've been taught. So we see this in anti-Semitism. We see this in other causes that are clearly calling evil what God says is good, and good what God says is evil. And so some of the pestilences just from last year, seeing in China, the Napa that had a 70% mortality rate. Pandemics here, the nightmare spread of the mysterious pneumonia that started in China. The pandemics are a catalyst for the coming New World Order. So here, the World Economic Forum here, understand the UN, the bad guys, they want to take any kind of crisis and use it to gain more power. So here they're seeing pandemics as a catalyst. They're very clear about that. The C word, I guess I'd be careful not to get shut down if I say the C word. We all know what that is. Here we said the Great Reset was able to come in because of pandemics, because of pestilences. You're able to control the populations out of fear. And so here the UN was granted these powers, and at the cost of national sovereignty. And so we see even come May, the WHO is taking over even more sovereignty from all the UN nations, to where pandemic occurs, they can override the nations with the way the response is supposed to be. And so we see this global power coming over every aspect of life. And so here we see disease X, the next big pandemic, and experts warn the virus would kill over 50 million people. And so here, this through fear, gaining control. And so last year, of course, October 7th. And so it's all about Israel. And here, they even said the whole reason behind it was the Alaska flood, wanting to keep Israel from sacrificing, keep Israel from rebuilding her temple, keep Israel from returning to her God. And so what began on October 7th is now a 7-front war. And then the economic shakings that we saw last year, they're going to become more so this year. US banks filed to shut 64 branches in a single week. And so we saw banks failing. We saw billion-dollar natural disasters that cost more than they ever have before last year. And central bank digital currencies can replace cash. This is not time to turn back. And so it's all about, this is this problem. The banks are failing. This is this problem. The dollar's going down. This is this problem. Global financial collapse is right around the corner. But it's going to be okay, because this is a perfect time to change the economy of the world, which they told us in 2020, I believe. We've looked at that quote from Greta a few times, that's exactly what they want to do, is change the economy of the world to blockchain digital currencies, and they've told us this too, very brazenly, that it's going to be in you instead of the tracking, instead of all the information being wearable. It's going to be in you, and that we are hackable animals. And so all of that is moving toward the technology, and what you see happening in the tribulation, what you see happening with the mark of the beast. And we saw the masses falling for a lie. And so I think a lot of what we actually see is the enemy is checking to see how his propaganda machines really work. And we've seen since October 7th that universities, in America, it's absolutely disgusting, but it's not just America. We see the education system globally has been indoctrination centers. We've seen how the education system for the next generation has taught them the lie. And it has perfectly prepared them to do exactly what the media and what the government tells them to do. And I wonder how much of that is just the enemy kind of testing to see how much power he really has over the population before he really needs to use it. But we've seen the masses quickly falling in lockstep, even what they called it lockstep, quickly falling into lockstep on what the media and what they've been indoctrinated to believe. And it's scary how quickly kids knew nothing about something, but became wise fools, acting like they knew something, completely reprobate and having absolutely no idea who God is. It's frightening how quickly that happens. So here we see the Palestinian poll, the October 7th attack. The majority of the Palestinians, not only mass majority, not only supported it, but almost 60% strongly supported the murder, rape, decapitation of babies, strongly supported that. That's crazy. We look at the UN, which the UN is basically just a terrorist organization itself. It's horrible. But if you look right here, you see 2023, their resolutions. So they're calling nations out on, on what they think is wrong. Okay. North Korea just has one. Okay. Let me look at, you look at the atrocities that go on in the world, right? Israel has 14. Russia just has 2. Israel has 14. Syria just has 1. This is insane. And it shows you, and no wonder as they've gone into Gaza, they've seen, the UN facilities with tunnels right in the very facility. They've even seen that the UN schools were teaching terrorism to the kids. And so this is the world that we live in. Survey, 1 in 5 young Americans has a positive view of Osama bin Laden. 1 in 5. And so, where are they being indoctrinated? What's happening here? But we see this massive delusion and reprobate mind. And so, and here's just more of this, just the insanity. And we see the evil, calling evil good and calling what God loves, calling good evil. So what do we expect in 2024? More war and more threats of war. And already we see that, already in the first days of 2024 and the last days of 2023, war, World War III, regional war, all on the brink. Famine, inflation, and world economies on the brink of severe correction. So we are about to see an economic collapse, is what the experts are saying. Global economies moving to blockchain CBDCs. See, that's what the enemy needs to do. He needs to move the global economies into digital so it can be traced. You can't trace the dollar, paper money. You can't trace it. So it has to be gone, and the digital has to be put in place. And in order for that to happen quickly, you have to have a big problem that has a big reaction for them to come in with their solution that they already have in pocket. And then increase in reprobate thinking and behavior, especially against the Jews and true Bible believers. And so here we see just in the last few days, here as the American warship is going home, the Iranian warship enters the Red Sea. I think America looks as weaker than America has ever looked. We're incredibly vulnerable, and that's by design. China says reunification with Taiwan is inevitable. New Year's address. So just yesterday, China said it's happening. Taiwan is going to be part of China again, whether they want to or not. And here, incoming foreign minister Katz, we are at the height of World War III. My focus is on the hostages. And so here, the whole world is being brought into World War III through the Middle East. Biden warns U.S. military may get pulled into direct conflict with Russia. Kim Jong-un tells military leaders to mobilize the most powerful means to destroy enemies, including the U.S. South Korea has reportedly detected signs of North Korea making launch preparations for solid fuel, intermediate and intercontinental ballistic missiles. So strategic provocations are expected in the new year. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's talking a lot of talk, which he normally does. But eventually the talk won't just be talk. Things are going to start popping off. Hopefully it's after us, the restrainer, is gone. Dutch commander-in-chief call on Netherlands to prepare for a war with Russia. So there's war. Everyone is talking about war. Everyone is expecting and readying themselves for war. And here we see full regional war. You know, just remember how little Israel is. There is no part of Israel right now that is not under attack. 7 fronts in this tiny little place. The Iron Dome is a miracle, and God is outright a miracle. You know, there are so many missiles that are fired from Lebanon, that are fired from Gaza, that miraculously fall in Lebanon and fall in Gaza instead of going into Israel. But they're being hit. Every part of Israel is under attack. This is crazy. And Iran is the main instigator of all of this. Iran arms, all of this is supported by Iran. And so we see here Yemen, all of this is going into this tiny little place, Israel. Why? Because this is spiritual. It's not about the land or the sea. It's not about the country. It's the dwelling of his majesty. This is the place that God put his name, that he gave to Israel. And the enemy is trying to take it for himself. And he won't. So Iran threatens to close the Strait of, I can't pronounce it, in the Mediterranean Sea, unless Israel stops bombing Gaza and U.S. warns Tehran. It's deeply involved in attacks on shipping. And so here we see the economy again is going to be squeezed. Already the oil prices are responding to what Iran is doing. Hezbollah may attempt to invade Jordan. And U.S. to withdraw largest aircraft. This is what we did today. The U.S. withdrew the largest aircraft carrier in the world from Israel's shores, just as Iran was sending theirs in. So, yep. So here, new year, new strategy. Will Iran shift threats to Israel? And here, you know, with all the pressure on Iran, you know, the Bible does say Elam, which is in Iran. That's right where one of their nuclear reactors is, will be destroyed. And that it may be Israel hits it, and maybe it mysteriously gets hit. Also, all these weapons, a lot of these weapons that are coming in from Syria, all right there around Damascus. Isaiah 17, Damascus is going to get destroyed. And so all these things are things that could very well happen even before the morning. In one morning, we could wake up and Damascus has been destroyed, just like Isaiah 17 tells us. And so all of these things we're seeing build. And so there's more warning of pestilences. And doctors now are fearing that the next strain could trigger heart failure across the globe. And here it's very interesting how there's these global threats now all of a sudden. So I'll let people kind of come to their own conclusions about that. But death rates from heart conditions surging among young Americans. And so here, young people who normally don't have to worry about these kinds of things because of treatments that people have taken in recent years, I believe that's what's happening here, is people have been set up. And so doctors fear the new strain could trigger heart failure across the globe. And so we've got these pandemics that create fear. And of course, we see the WHO, which is going to come in and squeeze, taking over sovereignty, taking over more rights. And so this is interesting. World economic collapse. And of course, problem, reaction, solution, there's a digital solution that's already there. Awesome. Wonderful. The global elites have already come up with the perfect solution for when the world economies fail. So here, Economist Harry Dent is warning that this year is going to be the biggest crash of our lifetime. So they're calling for not a recession, they're calling for a depression that's going to result in, you know, the world having to make some serious corrections and in order to not go into a full-on depression for many, many years. And so guess what? That's going to be blockchain, CBDCs. It's going to be the digital currency. And it's what's already being worked out all around the world. Now, this is interesting, and you guys may have heard of this, the US debt clock. I don't know. This was I believe it was, yeah, New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, my husband said, this is significant because he checks the debt clock. My husband is just one of those. He checks the debt clock on a regular basis because it's crazy that we're just absurd the amount of debt that that the nation is in. And so he checks this on a regular basis, and he said he's never seen anything like this. That here, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And this is the Revelation 12 sign from 2017. So this is a sign that most people that have been watching recognize that this is the Revelation 12 sign from 2017 that got everybody really excited, looking for the rapture. And so this would be, now it does have a mirrored, this is interesting because Jupiter here is mirrored to where this right here, where it's big, that's where it was in September of 2017. Small up here, more by, I guess, the woman's heart, more by Virgo's heart, is where it was on May 14th of that same year. So here at Israel's birthday, it was up by the heart. And then it was, you know, like giving birth on for the Revelation 12 sign. And so that's interesting here that it's there. And so a lot of people were like me, trying to figure out, well, why on earth is this on the usdebtclock.org? I believe it's still there. If it's not there right away when you go, there's this little thing to the side that says secret window. And if you hit open, it'll pop up if it's still there. So this was a mystery, and I was asking people, what does this mean? Have you seen this before? And so, of course, you know, minds go, and it's like, you know, the enemy is telling us what they're doing, that kind of thing, which could be. But it actually turns out this is not the government. This is a private individual that I believe set up this website he's a lawyer, and he set up this website in, I believe, 2008. And so, and my husband said he's been checking this website regularly, and it's on like preppers. This is more, from my understanding, this website is more checked by preppers and by people kind of watching the government than it is checked by watchmen and believers. It's more for people that are checking it from that purpose on. So he's been watching it for that. And he said he's never seen anything Christian on it before, any kind of warnings on it before. It was always just kind of where you can keep up with the US economy and what's happening. But since then, as I was doing some digging, a sister in Christ, Nikki Larson, hello Nikki, because I know she's going to watch this. She said, no, he has done similar things throughout the years. And so she had all these screenshots. And so I posted them on my YouTube channel. You can go back to the community and look at them. I posted the other screenshots, and on Telegram, I posted all of them. So he's done this before where he's posted warnings here where you could click on the secret window, and he's posted warnings, or he's posted other Bible verses. And so I think this is a Christian who set up this to warn people about the debt. But also every now and again he'll throw just an encouragement, something biblical up there too. So I thought this was really interesting that he chose to put up, here, what watchmen really see as a sign of the rapture. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So exactly what to make of it, I don't fully know, but I'm leaning toward that this guy's a believer. He's done this kind of thing before, and that he is warning people, and he keeps this as a way to warn people of where the economy is in the bubble that's about to burst. And so here, oil price news, oil advances as Iran warship in Red Sea ratchets tensions higher. So again, the oil prices are going up because we see here the Red Sea is increasingly, it is not, it is going to cause more and more problems for people to pass through. And so we see the oil prices going up. Iran is threatening to affect oil even more. And we see BRICS. Now, 5 other major countries have joined BRICS, and 130 nations move toward BRICS, putting the US dollar at risk. And so what they want to do is move away from using the US currency. So they want to move away from using the dollar. Right now, because the dollar is still more stable than a lot of world currencies, it is still used as a backup or a transfer currency. So they have to kind of put it in the US dollar before moving it to another currency. And they're trying to get around that as much as possible, because really they want to avoid sanctions, and they want to tank the US dollar. They want to tank the strength of the nation that is in the dollar. And so moving away from, of course, the petrodollar to where there's really nothing backing the currency at all. And globally, it's not going to just be the dollar that falls. It's going to be a domino effect that affects the global currencies, because globally they need the currency to be no longer paper, but it all to be one currency that they can at least control, even if it's not one currency, a currency that can at least be controlled globally. And that's what they're working to move toward. And so here, reprobate minds in 2024, the reprobate minds are increasing. Unfortunately, there's been a genocide of Christians. And so you don't hear about this, because all that you really are hearing about is Gaza and Palestine. But here, Muslim herders are murdering Christian farmers. And here in Nigeria, babies, children were massacred. And you don't hear a word about it, because as Amir would say, no Jews, no news. It's all for a reason. Everything that you hear is for a reason. TSA is aware of Al-Qaeda video calling for attacks on Jewish and Western targets. And so more and more, hand in hand, the hatred of Jews, the hatred of Israel, the hatred of America and Christians. And here, this photo, here it was snapped in Chicago today, which was, I think this was yesterday. So they're literally cosplaying terrorists in the streets of American cities. Again, a reprobate mind. People have been just giving over to a reprobate mind. And Israel, UN officials no longer granted automatic visas in Israel because they've been covering up for Hamas. They've been propagandizing for Hamas, and they've actually been training, literally training Hamas soldiers through the schools. They're seeing that now as they've gone in. Pro-Palestinian protesters block LAX access, ceasefire is not enough, because it's not about that. It's about completely destroying the nation of Israel. That's what it's about. And UN agencies have endangered the civilians in Gaza, and they've done that all along. Majority of anti-Semitic crimes in Germany are related to foreign or religious ideology. And so here we see where we've been, we see where we're going, and it's heavy. But like we said before, the world is teetering. It's teetering on this brink of the last seven, the 70th week of Daniel. It's teetering. But before the tribulation, the rapture takes place. So, and it happens during a relative normal, at least globally. People are still buying and selling. They're still giving into marriage. They're still eating and drinking. There's still a relative normal when the rapture takes place. And so how much longer can all this teeter? And so that's the question here. So a final thought, as we are teetering, as we're seeing all these things, don't get discouraged, be encouraged. And be about your Father's business. Ask God, who am I supposed to be sharing your word with today? Because time is running short, and our job isn't to sit on our hands and say, okay, I can't wait for Jesus to come back, even though I cannot wait for Jesus to come back. This is not the time to sit on your hands. This is time to be busy about the Lord's business. It's the time to abide. It's the time to do the things that you need to do, because we don't know when he's coming back. Nobody knows when he's coming back. But we see the day approaching, and we see the day approaching quickly. We see the birth pains are getting closer together, and they're getting more severe. And so we need to be about our Father's business and be ambassadors. So I hope this was encouraging, even though it was heavy. And I hope you guys have a wonderful 2024 and continue to look up, continue to pay attention to watching for Jesus. Remember, Jesus tells us, he commands us to watch. He says, you're not going to know exactly when. And that's where a lot of people want to, you can't know the day or hour, you can't know the day or hour. Well, they say that to shut you up. They say that to say, don't look. That's not what Jesus said. Jesus said, you're not going to know exactly. Now, he also says, if you're watching, you will know. He also says you won't be caught off guard if you're watching. But you won't know exactly. What does he say? Therefore, watch. Therefore, watch. Jesus tells us repeatedly to watch. So watch. And don't go back to sleep. You got so much to look forward to. All right. Thank you. That was 2022 or 2023 going into 2024.